Click the bell icon to get latest videos from Ekeeda.
Hello friends, we are going to discuss something called as simulation today. Now what exactly is simulation? Simulation होता क्या है? Now simulation can be defined as a technique of simulating, that is to create artificial but realistic conditions. So imagine I'm a farmer who wants to know how much it will rain for the next 90 days or 45 days. Imagine I am a broker who wants to know the movement of prices of the shares of a particular stock. Imagine I am a news reporter who wants to simulate the poll results. In such a scenario, we can use a mathematical model or a mathematical tool called as a simulation, which can help us to estimate scientifically how the things will happen if they are going to happen in reality. That is called as simulation in general. Now coming to the mathematical or the definition of simulation under operation research, it can be defined as a numerical technique used for evaluating alternative course of action based upon facts and assumptions. So we can say simulation is a technique. It's a numerical technique that is used to predict the numbers. Numbers can be the prices, numbers can be the average rainfall, numbers can be the number of people who are going to visit my clinic, number of people who are going to visit my superstore, and it's based on certain realities and certain assumptions. So next thing is, it is based on a computerized model in order to represent actual decision making under conditions of uncertainty. So when things are not certain, I may like to know the number of people who might like to visit my shop, the number of people who might actually buy the product from my shop, the number of students who may pass a particular exam, the weather conditions in a particular situation or a season. In all such scenarios, we can use a simulation based on facts as well as based on certain assumptions, and ultimately it is a mathematical model which can be used to work out the things realistically. Now, what are the different types of simulation? We've got three types of simulation. Now the first type of simulation that I can discuss is called as identity simulation, where you try to simulate the whole system. So as a bank manager, I might like to simulate the number of account holders or the clients who are going to visit my branch at a particular time of the day in all the departments. That can be called as a identity simulation. On the other hand, we have something called as quasi simulation, which is only a part of the total simulation. So अगर मैं कहता हूँ कि एज ए मैनेजर मुझे मेरे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का, मेरे ब्रांच का सभी डिपार्टमेंट्स में कितने क्लाइंट्स आते हैं बिटवीन मॉर्निंग 10 टू आफ्टरनून 12, 10 से 12 के बीच में कितने क्लाइंट्स आते हैं, उसको अगर मुझे सिमुलेट करना है तो डेट विल बी माय आइडेंटिटी सिमुलेशन. That is, I'm simulating the overall banking system in my branch. Whereas under the second type, that is quasi system, we only simulate part of the total system. For example, trying to simulate the number of people who are going to deposit the cash at the cash counter from 10 to 2 can be called as the quasi simulation. In the same manner, simulating the attendance of a particular school or a college can be called as identity simulation, because you are simulating the data of the whole organization. On the other hand, if you are simulating only the attendance of a particular one TY BSc or TY BCom or TY BMS, then it will become a quasi simulation. So quasi is something that is in part and not the whole system. Other than this, we have the third type called as the laboratory simulation or laboratory simulation. Now, laboratory simulation, as the name indicates, it is a simulation that is created under laboratory conditions. Here, based on certain numerical models, I may like to simulate the number of patients who are going to visit a particular hospital on a particular day at a particular time. I may like to simulate the rainfall based on the climatic conditions. I may like to simulate the average I may like to simulate the average production based on factors like soil, climatic conditions and the seeds. So that is called as the laboratory simulation. Here simulation is done based on certain numerical methods, but it is limited to a specific area on experimental basis. Now the next thing I'd like to discuss is called as why do we need to learn simulation? What is the purpose? What is the rationale behind seasonal what is the rationale behind simulation analysis? Why we need to do this simulation analysis? The first and foremost thing is I like to predict more accurately what may happen in the future. Second, I may also like to estimate in advance and plan out in detail much more in advance. First and foremost, first and foremost, why will someone like to use simulation technique or simulation analysis? The first primary reason is to get a lot of information. Information regarding the expected sales, information regarding the estimated expenditure or the estimated budget for the next 6 months or for the next 1 year. All these things can be easily predicted using some kind of simulation technique. This is very true especially for things like cash management, inventory management, where we can adopt a real life simulation system which can work on some kind of softwares and predict what can be the requirements of the organization on a particular day. How much cash they may need, how much stock they may need, all those things can be easily understood and estimated using simulation. The second primary reason why we do analysis of simulation is that it helps to clear the obstacles. In case I estimate or I guess the things that may happen in a scientific manner, I can always prepare myself before the happening of the event. That way, simulation helps in protecting the user by providing them the signals of danger because of the earlier estimation. So that can be the biggest advantage of simulation. The next big advantage we have is to study the complex system. So in today's world, it's not just science. In today's world, the things are getting very complicated. Let it be whether demand or supply, predicting the poll results, predicting the estimated sales or expenses as such. Therefore, simulation gives us a scientific base, a mathematical base on which I can always simulate the data to find out what can be my expected values and what are the actual values. So that is where simulation can be very useful. The next big use of simulation is used as a pre-testing model. Simulation can be used for testing some of the medicines which are never ever tried on human beings, and then they can be tried on certain other animals just to test their behavior or reaction to that particular medicine. Therefore, simulation is a technique used for simulating such kind of data to understand how much road accidents may take place before and after bringing certain changes, and this is where simulation is very vital. It helps the organization, it helps the management, provided they take it in a very positive frame of mind. The next reason for taking simulation can be that simulation can be tested before implementing. One can always test on very small basis within friends before we actually pass it to the common public. That way you need not spend chunk of the money in developing the whole system or the economy, rather only focus on a very limited part. That is one of the biggest advantage of this particular system. And last but not the least, this whole system can be used as a pedagogical device to predict the fall in the sugars or to predict the increase in the blood pressures as such. Therefore, this is very important that we learn something called as simulation and also learn how to adapt it in your real life. Next part we are going to discuss is called as advantages. Now, what can be the possible advantage of simulation? First of all, it is very easy to understand. Though the operations may look very complicated, but simulation itself is very easy to understand. For someone who can just solve initial one or two problems based on simulation, they can easily complete almost majority of the problems under simulation. Therefore, it is very important that we learn simulation. The next important point for simulation is that simulation provides a lot of information. Information regarding the pricing of the product that may happen at a particular day or a particular week, pricing about the various prices of the products and so on. So that can be one of the biggest drawback of simulation, is that it can over depend on few of its customers rather than doing it on their own. Therefore, simulation should be used but only to a limited extent. Next, we'll talk about the advantages of simulation. How simulation will benefit the organizations. Simulation का किसी भी organization को क्या benefit होगा? तो सबसे बड़ा benefit है, it provides data. It provides a lot of information. Imagine you are facing a very complicated or a complex situation. In such situations, simulations can be very much helpful. The next big advantage of simulation is that once the simulation starts for a particular product, then the whole simulation may continue till the time the product is not completed and sold in the market. Therefore, it is very important that simulation should be used in such cases. Without simulation, they will be completely directionless that how much quantity and when it should be purchased. The next big advantage of simulation is that it anticipates the bottlenecks. Whatever problem areas are there, they are identified during the simulation technique, and they are trying to optimize the whole scene. To optimize means to do in the best possible manner or the lowest possible manner, and this is where simulation is very vital. To simulate the data of the people in the organization is very vital, without whom the whole system may fail. What can be the possible advantage of simulation? The first big advantage is that it is very easy to understand. So it is not a rocket science. Simulation doesn't need a lot of calculations. All the calculations will happen at the later stage when we do for some other calculations. Right now at simulation, all you need to know is plus, minus, multiply and divide. That's it. Once you get these four things, then simulation becomes very easy to understand. Second, one of the possible advantage of simulation can be suitable for all the types. So whether you are making a dam, whether you are making a construction road, whether you are making a well or an underground tank or some kind of fabrication work, or you are dealing in some other products, this machine is suitable for almost all. You can't deny that this machine won't work. Now, what are the basic requirements for developing a simulation model? How can I establish a simulation model? मैं एक simulation model कैसे create कर सकता हूँ, उसको develop कर सकता हूँ? That we need to learn at this stage. So there are certain basic steps that we need to follow for developing a simulation model. So what can be the requirements to develop a good simulation model? The first and foremost, that it should be very simple. Simple to understand, simple to operate, simple to understand for even a layman. Second big feature of a good simulation model is that it should be comprehensive. What do you mean by comprehensive? It should cover all the situations, all the possible conditions, thereby therefore it is very important that you keep the things simple. Secondly, it should be comprehensive. By comprehensive, I mean to say that it should be complete in all terms. Nothing should be left out of the data. The third is it should be robust. Robust means it should be very vast. For someone who is doing the analysis of the poll results, the analysis will go for a certain number of days, if not weeks, if not months. But it should be looked upon that your simulation model is quite flexible. It should be flexible enough to adapt to the changes. It should be flexible enough to manage or moderate the data so that it is in sync with your overall system. The next big requirement of any simulation model is that it should be flexible. Flexibility should be there regarding who the people will operate, how they will operate, what work they are supposed to do, etc. etc. Therefore, it is equally important that your whole simulation model should be firm and it should be at the same time flexible in the sense to accommodate those changes rather than making some random changes on your own. Next, the big plus point for simulation will be its acceptance by the particular management. And if the management people of any organization participate and try to make this whole system effective and implementable, then it is their prime responsibility or duty to see to it that they work through those particular sections. So these are some of the basic requirements of a good simulation plan or a simulation model. Now the next thing I'm going to discuss is something called as variables that are used in simulation model. Now, what are variables first of all? Variables are all those numbers which can be used during the process of simulation. We have something called as input variables. Input variables are the numbers that are fed by us in the system to generate some kind of data that can be called as the input variables. Most of the times all the simulation models are based on the past data, and this past data can be simply called as the input variables, also called as exogenous variables. Now these input variables can be controlled or uncontrolled. Now, control variables are variables whose behavior can be predicted with certainty or which are more or less fixed, whereas uncontrolled variables are beyond our control and therefore they can behave randomly in whatever manner they want. So that is the basic difference between an input variable which is controlled and uncontrolled. The next thing I am going to discuss is called as status variables. Status variables, in some kind of systems what happens is that the data keeps on changing according to the position of the respondents. For example, in case I am collecting the data from Big Bazaar, and if I go at a particular time of day, the response won't remain same. It will keep on changing. That is indicated by the status variables. Status variables are all those variables which change constantly in the particular simulation model. The next thing is output or endogenous variables. Now this is the actual variables which will be received as the output. Now it is up to us to decide how to use these outputs, and hence they are also called as endogenous outputs or endogenous variables. First is system simulation. Under system simulation, the whole system is reproduced as it is. So in case of an aquatic system, we can say that it is a system simulation model where I can create the same working conditions under which the whole system can be developed. For example, simulation of the number of animals or birds in an aquatic system can be called as a system simulation method. The second method is called as Monte Carlo simulation method, and this is the most important method for us, and this is what we are going to discuss at the later stage today. The Monte Carlo simulation method. What do you mean by Monte Carlo simulation method? Monte Carlo simulation method is a method that uses random numbers, and based on the probability they try to estimate the values. That is called as the random numbers. Now let's see the algorithm for a Monte Carlo simulation model. Means what will be the flow chart, what will be the steps, or what is the exact procedure of simulating a particular situation under Monte Carlo simulation model. Let's look at the steps. So the first step will be to decide the variables, identify the variables which will influence your system significantly और very effectively. आप सबसे पहले उन वेरिएबल्स को आइडेंटिफाई कर लो जिनकी वजह से आपके सिस्टम में चेंजेस होता है या जिनकी वजह से आपका सिस्टम एस्टेब्लिश हुआ है. द सेकेंड स्टेप विल बी टू डिटरमाइन द क्यूमुलेटिव प्रोबेबिलिटी डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन of each such variable identified as per step 1. This is the second step where we will be given certain probabilities and based on that we calculate certain cumulative probabilities. The next step, the third step will be to get the random numbers. Now most of the times random numbers will be given to us in the problem, and as such we did not put our own random numbers because just as the name indicates it's a random number, but you can't use it randomly in the exam. You can use it randomly in a real life situation, but in the exam it will become very difficult to check the paper for the moderator, and therefore they'll always specify some of the random numbers. The next thing is, once these random numbers and their probabilities are disclosed, we can always calculate the cumulative probability, and based on that we can always decide how the variable will behave. There will be some pointers which will indicate their behavior. Now this process shall be continued and repeated till the time the simulation process is not complete. The next part I'm going to discuss is called as random numbers. Now what are random numbers? And see, they are very important while solving the problems under simulation. Without random numbers it will be very difficult to simulate the data. Therefore you must have a good set of random numbers which can be simulated so as to get the actual data through simulation methods. Here random numbers can be defined as a set of numbers or observations in the probability distribution where each such number will have equal probability of getting selected. For example, let us say I want to select 4 students out of a class of 50. I can simply put 50 numbers 1 to 50, put them in the class and randomly select any 4 students. That can be called as the random numbers. A set of numbers where the probability of each number being selected is equal to the probability of all the numbers can be called as random numbers. ऐसा नंबर जिसको सिलेक्ट करने का चांसेस रैंडमली इक्वल है, उस नंबर को हम लोग सिंपल वर्ड्स में कहा जा सकता है रैंडम नंबर. एंड ऑल आवर कैलकुलेशंस इन दिस होल टॉपिक of simulation is based on random numbers. If your random numbers selected are not worthy, then you might not be able to create the real life situation. That's the best point. The next part that we are going to discuss is called as business models. Now what are business models? Business models are nothing but the simulated system which is exactly similar to the original one. For example, I may have a demand simulation model where I just put down some numbers and I'm able to predict how much shall be the demand for a particular product. That can be called as the second way. So business models can be explained as a system that is created to generate certain numbers. Like I may like to know the number of people entering in my shop at a particular time of the day, the number of students remaining absent on a particular Saturday, let us say the second Saturday or the fourth Saturday in the month, or the number of employees not coming on time, or the number of students who may fail in a particular subject. All these things are based on some kind of data and some kind of information, based on which you estimate certain things, and that's why we are using here something called as the probability distribution. So business models are useful for understanding how the behavior will be there between two variables: behavior between the client and the design of a product, behavior between a product engineer and the overall production system. In all such cases, we can use the simulation techniques. So far we have discussed what is a simulation, what is a simulation model. We saw just now what is a business model. We discussed the various simulation methods. We talked about the advantage of simulation, we talk about the disadvantage of simulation, and so on. I hope you got this concept very clear. Not most of these things are specified in the study material, and therefore you need to refer some standard book for covering this part. Thanks for watching this video. Do subscribe to our channel Ekeeda.